Last year, around Christmas time, I found myself completely falling apart. We had just purchased our first home, and instead of feeling joy, I was irritable about everything. The decorations felt overwhelming. The mess in the house made my skin crawl. Adjusting to a new routine and unpacking boxes, managing work and family obligations, buying gifts, every single thing set me off. I snapped at my partner over the smallest things. I felt this constant tightness in my chest, like a simmering rage just beneath the surface that I couldn't seem to control. And the worst part, I was terrified. I was terrified that I was going to lose my family because I couldn't get a handle on my moods and my outbursts. So I did something that I'd been avoiding for a long time, and I found a therapist. And for a year, we've worked together. We started with the surface stuff like the irritability and the reactivity and the hair trigger temper. But slowly and gently, we went deeper. We began reprocessing past traumas that I didn't even realize were still running in my nervous system, wounds that I thought I'd gotten over that were still living in my body and quietly dictating how I responded to stress. And then something incredible started to happen. I started to feel good and grounded and more like myself than I have in years. And I still do maintenance sessions with her, but the intensive work has slowed way down. And here's what's become crystal clear to me over this past year, something that's completely shifted how I move through the world. Anger isn't something to be eradicated from your life. It's something to pay attention to. It's a messenger. And if you're willing to listen and lean in, it has so much to say. And today, we're going to be shining a light onto one of the most misunderstood and feared emotions in our whole society, especially for women. We're going to talk about why it's perfectly acceptable for men to express anger, but dangerous when women do the same. You're going to learn how to embrace your sacred anger and how to work with it instead of against it, and why this one shift in perspective might be the most liberating thing you do for yourself this whole year. So grab your tea and settle in and get ready, because this episode is going to change the way that you see one of your most powerful emotions and allow you to begin to heal. Welcome to Jyotindi, Journey to the Inner Divine, a sacred space for healing energy, emotional release, and soulful transformation. If you're ready to live with joy, ease, and purpose, you're in the right place. The world fears women's anger, and it always has. It's not a new development that the world is terrified of angry women. From the time that we're little girls, we're taught to be polite and nice and agreeable. We're praised for being sweet and not making waves and for keeping the peace. And when we do get angry, when we raise our voices or when we stand up for ourselves or when we refuse to smile and nod, we're labeled as bitches, crazy, hysterical, unfeminine. We're too much. And here's the thing that's always fascinated me. Our language, created and codified by men, doesn't have one unflattering term to describe men who vent their anger at women. Not one. Even words like bastard or son of a bitch don't actually condemn the man. They place the blame on a woman, his mother. Isn't that interesting? So what do we do with our anger? We push it down. We bottle it up. We transmute it into self-hatred and anxiety and depression. And we do everything we possibly can not to feel it. But here's what we know about emotions. When you ignore them, they don't just go away. They get louder. They build pressure. And eventually, they explode. Have you ever heard that saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned? That's not because women are inherently unstable or irrational. It's because by the time we finally allow ourselves to express anger, it's been building for our entire lives. And when it erupts like Mount St. Helens. And then society's response isn't compassionate or understanding. It's, see, this is why women can't be trusted with their emotions. And we, the women who finally couldn't hold it in anymore, feel guilt and shame on top of the years of suppressed rage. We internalize the message that our anger is proof that something is wrong with us, not with the system that forced us to swallow it for so long. But what if there's another way? What if you didn't have to live in fear of your own emotions? What if anger wasn't the enemy? I want to reframe anger for you. Instead of seeing it as losing control or seeing red or a blind rage, what if we saw it as a sacred messenger to be revered and honored? Because here's the truth: anger is one of the clearest messengers that we have. When we feel happy or nudge gently towards something, there's still a lot of room to wonder if this is really the right path or am I sure this is what I want? But when anger shows up, it's crystal clear. Anger says something happened that shouldn't have, and I need to do something about it now. It shows up when somebody crosses your boundary, or when someone that you love is mistreated, or when you witness an injustice. If someone behaves in a way that is completely misaligned with your values, that's when you get mad. Anger also appears when we're attacked, or when we feel utterly powerless, or when our authority, our property, or our feelings, our very humanity has been just disregarded. It's your soul's alarm system saying, pay attention. This matters. Don't ignore this. Sometimes anger steps in when we don't know how to handle our other emotions, like grief or sadness or deep pain, because it's easier to feel furious than to feel broken. Anger gives us a sense of power when we're actually feeling vulnerable and afraid. And yes, some people default to anger because it's easier to point fingers and blame others than it is to look inward at their own part in what's going on. That's shadow anger. Anger that's misdirected, unprocessed, and weaponized. But when anger is sacred, when it's connected to truth and to your values and your boundaries, it becomes one of the most powerful forces for change in your life and in the world. And here's why society fears angry women: because we get things done. When women get angry, we stand up, we create change, we rock the boat, and we refuse to accept the unacceptable. The system was designed to keep women docile because women who are sad and self-hating and turn the blame in on themselves are easier to control. They don't make waves and they don't start movements demanding change. Think about the women who have changed the world for the better. And what do they have in common? They have a deep passion for their cause. They have motivation to create change. And yes, anger at the system that created the injustice in the first place. Look at Harriet Tubman. She harnessed her sacred anger at the brutal mistreatment of her people and led over 700 enslaved people to freedom. She didn't politely ask permission. She didn't wait for the system to change on its own. She acted boldly, courageously, fueled by righteous anger. How about Tarana Burke, who was so fed up with women being assaulted and nobody caring that she started the Me Too movement, creating a platform for survivors everywhere to stand in their truth and in their power. She gave a voice to millions of women who had been told to stay silent, to not make a fuss, to protect their abusers' reputations. Her anger became a rallying cry that shifted the global consciousness. And these women didn't suppress their anger. They didn't apologize for it. They channeled it. They honored it as the sacred messenger that it was, and they changed the world because of it. And that's the power that you have access to when you stop fearing your anger and start listening to it. And don't get me wrong, anger is often over-celebrated with messages like, always trust your anger, which may be the message you feel is forming in this episode. Or maybe you've heard another spiritual teacher prematurely spiritualize it away with messages like, anger means you're unhealed. So today, we're going to reframe it in a balanced, discerning, and wise way. Listening to your anger can feel pretty scary at first. You might feel like if you don't keep it contained, you're going to unleash an uncontrollable rage and do serious damage to your relationships or your career or yourself. Maybe, like me, you fear that if you show your anger, you'll be rejected or abandoned. Righteous anger is not necessarily explosive by nature. It's clarifying. It has a grounded, steady heat rather than a chaotic fire. Spiritually, righteous anger is a protective life force energy, the part of the psyche that defends dignity, justice, and integrity. Righteous anger isn't about escaping responsibility, and it arises when something violates your core values or your boundaries or a moral truth. So let's dive into the process of uncovering the messages in your justified righteous anger. First, you want to stabilize the energy so it doesn't tip into reactivity, because even justified anger can distort if it's unregulated. The first step is not action, it's containment. You're going to slow your body down. You're going to breathe. You're going to do grounding exercises. Get connected to the earth and to the present moment. And the question here is, can I feel this anger without discharging it onto someone else? This preserves the signal without turning it into harm. Second, you're going to name the violated value or boundary. Righteous anger always has a why. So, common violated values include things like safety, respect, consent, truth, fairness, autonomy, and dignity. And you're going to ask a powerful inquiry of yourself. What matters to me that was crossed? What feels non negotiable here? This step is going to move anger from your emotions into moral clarity. The third step is you're going to discern whether the anger is personal, relational, or collective. Because not all righteous anger is about you specifically. It could be personal, like one of your boundaries was crossed. It could be relational, like somebody you care about was harmed. Or it can be collective, like you're responding to an injustice or a systemic harm that's going on in society that you feel the need to stand up against. And this matters because the response is going to be different. A personal anger is going to lead you to set a boundary, or it's going to lead you to self-advocacy. Relational anger is going to direct you towards protection or confronting something or someone. And a collective anger is going to lead you to witness, to get in touch with your voice or take an action. And without this discernment, people might be trying to solve the wrong problem. So that's why it's important to not skip this step. The fourth step is to clarify what the anger is asking you to do or not to do. Righteous anger is directional. It might be calling you to speak up, to say no, to leave, or to intervene with something. It might be telling you to name your truth, to stop enabling something or someone. It could be telling you to protect someone, or it could be instructing you to withdraw your energy and reclaim it. And there's an important distinction here. Righteous anger doesn't always ask for confrontation. Sometimes it asks for a withdrawal. So your key question here is going to be, what action would honor this value without escalating the harm? Once you're clear on that, you're going to check for contamination by blame or unresolved wounds, because even righteous anger can pick up some static in the signal. And this step is all about integrity. Is this anger asking you to stand up for something or to stand against someone? Are you trying to punish somebody or protect somebody? Is this an old pain that's just hitching a ride on the current circumstances? If blame sneaks in, the anger can lose its clarity. And if grief is ignored, the anger can harden. Keeping this layer clean is keeping your anger clean and clear. So after that, step 6 is to act or consciously release without betraying yourself. Righteous anger completes itself through aligned response. Your completion might look like setting a firm boundary or naming a truth calmly. It could be taking ethical action or stepping away from a situation or a person. Or it could mean letting the anger go once it's informed you. And the goal here is not to stay angry. The goal is to stay aligned. And when your righteous anger is honored, it naturally subsides into self-respect and peace. And when we're speaking spiritually about this, righteous anger is your nervous system's way of saying life force recognizes a violation. It's not the opposite of compassion. It's what protects compassion from being exploited. And when we listen to it wisely, righteous anger becomes self-trust, ethical clarity, and grounded power. Now, something you might be wondering right now is what if you're not just outraged at something? What if you're actually mad at someone for doing something that hurt you? It is actually their fault, and you shouldn't have to do all this work to fix it when clearly the blame lies with them. Well, let's talk about it. There is another type of anger. Up until now, we've focused on justified anger, but there is also blaming anger. Blaming others gets us off the hook from taking responsibility. We create a victim mindset and we shift the responsibility to other people. Most people think that this type of anger is not helpful. And if you always default to being mad at somebody and keep mindlessly operating from a victim mindset, it can ruin your life. However, just like justified anger, there is a message in this too, but you might have to dig a little deeper to find it. So let's start with a reframe. Blaming anger isn't bad anger. It's a protective anger that has lost access to agency. And at its core, blaming anger usually arises when someone feels hurt or powerless or unsafe. And they believe, consciously or unconsciously, that taking responsibility would be too overwhelming, too shameful, or too costly. So instead of being an expression of power, it becomes a shield. And that's important because it means that the work is not about invalidating the anger, but about restoring the agency to the person holding it. The process of uncovering the truth behind blaming anger is a little bit different. You might think of it as a layered descent rather than a confrontation. First, you're going to witness the anger without collapsing into it. The first step is not owning responsibility yet. It's simply slowing down the reaction. Questions here are observational, not corrective. What am I angry about right now? Who am I assigning responsibility to? What story am I telling myself about why this happened? This first stage is about separating the emotion from the identity. I am experiencing anger rather than this anger is the truth. And without this step, people feel attacked or shamed and they stay stuck. The second step is identifying what the anger is protecting. Blaming anger almost always guards something softer. And underneath it, you'll often find things like grief, shame, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, powerlessness, or exhaustion. And this is where questions shift from who is wrong to what would I have to feel if I stopped blaming? What feels too vulnerable or too scary or too unfair to touch? And very often the answer is if I take responsibility, it means that I have to face how much this hurt me and how little control I had. Blaming keeps the pain external. So the third step, we have to differentiate the responsibility from self-blame. And this is a critical step. And this is often where people get stuck. Many people equate responsibility with it was my fault, or I should have known better, or I failed. So blaming anger stays because it feels safer than turning that harshness inward. But the truth is, the deeper truth, responsibility is about response, not fault. It's about a choice moving forward, not a judgment about the past. So your powerful inquiry here is, where do I actually have influence now, even if I didn't have it then? This gently restores agency without shaming. So the fourth step is to name the unmet need or the boundary. Once your emotional charge softens, the real message becomes clearer. Blaming anger often points to a boundary that was never set or a need that was never voiced. Maybe it was a desire that was denied or minimized, or a truth that was swallowed to keep the peace. Questions that help you find this clarity here are, what did I need that I didn't ask for? Or what was I tolerating that I shouldn't have been? Or what truth did I silence to avoid conflict or loss? This is where anger transforms from accusation into clarity. And the fifth step here is to reclaim your choice without bypassing your grief. Only after grief and vulnerability are acknowledged can responsibility emerge cleanly. It's not my job is to fix everything, but I get to choose how I respond now. And this might look like setting a boundary or letting go or having that hard conversation with someone. It could even mean leaving a situation or simply choosing not to carry resentment anymore. Here is where your anger completes its cycle. It no longer needs to stay loud. And spiritually speaking, blaming anger often appears when souls feel like something was taken from me and I don't know how to reclaim myself yet. It's a deeper invitation to return to power without bypassing pain, or to move from victimhood to sovereignty, or to integrate your truth with compassion. Not all anger is meant to be acted on either, but all anger is meant to be listened to. Blaming anger isn't a moral failure. It's a signal that responsibility feels unsafe. And when we make responsibility safe again, the anger no longer needs to point outward. So you can differentiate between justified anger and blaming anger. You're going to think of it like this. Blaming anger says, you need to fix this so I don't have to feel my pain. And your righteous anger says, this matters and I'm willing to respond in alignment with my values. So now that we've learned how to lean into both types of anger and to hear the message and heal your emotional state, we should touch on one more thing, and that is resentment. Righteous anger becomes resentment when your clarity is replaced by stagnation. More specifically, the shift happens when your truth is recognized, but not acted on or consciously released. Righteous anger has movement in it, and resentment is anger that's lost its direction. And you can describe your turning point like this. Righteous anger has a clear message. It points to a value or a boundary. It invites aligned action or conscious withdrawal. And it feels clean even if it is intense. Whereas resentment replays the same story over and over. It holds on to blame or moral superiority. It avoids choice when maintaining emotional charge. And it feels heavy and bitter and exhausting. In the exact moment it crosses the line, you might say, righteous anger asks what matters here, whereas resentment asks, why haven't they changed? Righteous anger empowers you to respond, and resentment keeps you waiting for someone else to make it right. Resentment can form when a boundary is known but not set. And this is why boundaries are so important. And if you haven't listened to our episode on boundaries, I highly encourage you to listen. You'll learn about what they really are and how to set and enforce them with love out of care for yourself and respect for others. Resentment also forms when a truth is seen but not spoken, or a choice is available but avoided, or grief underneath the anger is never acknowledged. Spiritually, resentment is often the cost of self-betrayal, and that's why it drains your life force. It's anger that keeps signaling, but it never completes its cycle. Anger becomes resentment when we ask it to stay longer than it was meant to. And when we listen and respond or release, anger can complete its sacred work and we can return to peace. So, how do we do that? How do we make sure that anger completes its sacred work and doesn't transform into resentment? Well, you do that through courage. You feel the fear of taking action and you take the action anyway. You feel the fear of diving into your anger to learn its true message, and then you lean in even harder. The healing path isn't for the faint of heart. Healing can be difficult and challenging, and at times it can be painful. But in the end, it is so worth it. The clarity, the peace, the knowledge that no matter what happens, you'll be able to handle it. That is a true blessing. Today, we explored anger, not as something to suppress or to explode, but as something intelligent. We talked about the difference between righteous anger and blaming anger, and how righteous anger points us towards our values, our boundaries, and our truth, and how blaming anger, while still meaningful, often asks us to look deeper at where responsibility feels unsafe or where pain has not yet been met with compassion. We also named the line where anger turns into resentment, when a message has been received but not acted on or consciously released, when we stay stuck instead of choosing alignment. Anger isn't here to live inside us. It's here to inform us and then guide us back to integrity. If you'd like support in working with your own anger in a grounded and gentle way, I've created a free integration practice to go along with this episode. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to mariaaurora.com/freebie/anger. It's a simple, embodied process that you can return to anytime anger shows up without judgment and without bypassing. And if you're feeling called to go even deeper, I'm going to be opening 3 spots in January for a one-on-one coaching and healing intensive. And this is for people who are ready to work with their emotions honestly, to reconnect with their inner authority, and to move forward in a way that feels aligned and sustainable. You can find more details in the show notes, or feel free to reach out if you know that that sounds like it's for you. Wherever you are on your journey, I want you to know this. Your emotions are not a problem to fix. They're messengers asking for your presence, your honesty, and your care. You don't have to rush your healing. You don't have to do it perfectly, and you don't have to do it alone. Thank you for being here with me today. Take good care of yourself, and don't forget, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.